The arrival of a Deathworlder, the Galactic Training Academy, was the most advanced military training center in the universe. Here, the best warriors from different planets trained to become defenders of the galaxy. It was a place of discipline, strength, and strategy. But today, something was different. The academy was silent. A strange tension filled the air. Hundreds of recruits from various alien species stood in the training grounds, whispering nervously. Even the instructors looked uneasy. Something had happened. Something that had never happened before. A Deathworlder had arrived. Humans were rare in the galaxy. Their home planet, Earth, was classified as a death world, a place full of danger, extreme weather, and powerful predators. Creatures on Earth had to fight every day just to survive. Because of this, humans were considered unnaturally strong, fast, and unpredictable. Many alien species feared them. Now one of them was standing at the entrance of the academy. He was tall compared to most aliens, his body lean but muscular. He wore a standard training uniform, but something about him felt dangerous. His short brown hair was slightly messy, his sharp blue eyes scanning the area like a predator studying its surroundings. He carried no weapons, yet every alien could feel the power in his presence. His name was Commander Jack Reynolds. The head instructor, a massive reptilian alien named Instructor Vok, cleared his throat and stepped forward. His scales darkened slightly, a sign of nervousness. "Human," he said in a deep, growling voice. "State your purpose." Jack took a step forward. His voice was calm but firm. "I am here to train." A wave of nervous whispers spread through the crowd. Some aliens took a step back. Others narrowed their eyes in suspicion. Instructor Vok crossed his arms. The academy was not designed for Deathworlders. Your kind does not follow normal rules. Jack smirked. Then maybe it's time the rules changed. More whispers. Some aliens looked terrified. Others seemed curious. A few of the stronger recruits, like the huge insectoid warrior Threx, sneered. "We don't need a Deathworlder here," Threx muttered. "He'll probably kill us in training." Vok hesitated. He knew that if a human truly wanted to fight, no normal alien could stop him. But the High Command had approved Jack's entry. He had no choice but to accept him. "Fine," Vok said. "You will take part in today's tests. If you fail, you leave. If you survive, we will decide what to do with you." Jack gave a small nod. "Sounds fair." The first test was a simple endurance run. Recruits had to complete 10 laps around the academy's massive training grounds. Each lap was nearly 2 miles long. The harsh gravity of the training field made it even harder. The aliens grinned. This would be impossible for a human. They had trained in high-gravity conditions for years. A soft-bodied species like a human would collapse after the first lap. The test began. At first, everything seemed normal. The stronger alien species took the lead, their powerful legs pushing them forward. The weaker species struggled behind. But after the first lap, something strange happened. Jack wasn't tired. He was speeding up. By the third lap, some aliens started slowing down. But Jack, he looked like he was just getting started. By the sixth lap, the first recruits began collapsing from exhaustion. Jack passed them with ease. By the ninth lap, even the strongest warriors were panting. Threx, the insectoid alien who had mocked Jack earlier, stumbled and fell to his knees. His limbs shook from exhaustion. Jack passed him without breaking a sweat. By the time Jack finished the 10th lap, only a handful of recruits were still running. He stopped at the finish line, not even breathing hard. The aliens stared in disbelief. "How?" someone muttered. Vok's eyes narrowed. He had never seen anything like this. Even the Academy's top athletes struggled with this test. But Jack had completed it effortlessly. Jack turned to the instructor. "What's next?" There was no arrogance in his voice, no mocking tone. He was calm, confident. That was the most terrifying thing about him. Instructor Vok clenched his jaw. "Next is the combat test." A ripple of excitement went through the crowd. Finally, they would see what a Deathworlder was really made of. Jack only nodded. His blue eyes held no fear. The aliens were starting to panic. They had thought this human was just another recruit. Now, they weren't so sure. The impossible strength. The combat arena at the Galactic Training Academy wasn't designed to be gentle. The environment simulated rough terrain, uneven rocky ground, scattered obstacles, and a thick haze in the air that made it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. It was the perfect testing ground for the galaxy's most promising warriors. But today, as the instructors gathered around the observation deck, they were less focused on the recruits and more on the human among them. Jack Reynolds stood calmly in the center of the arena. His expression was unreadable, neither nervous nor arrogant. Around him, a group of recruits began their warm-up exercises, stretching their multi-jointed limbs or sharpening their claws. Every alien had heard the stories by now. The Deathworlder who had effortlessly completed the endurance test. Jack's performance had already sown doubt and fear among the recruits. Some wanted to see if the human's strength in combat matched his stamina. Others just hoped they wouldn't have to face him. Instructor Vok signaled the first round. A large-scaled alien named Kroth stepped forward. Kroth was a champion brawler from a high-gravity world, his hulking form and serrated teeth making him a favorite to win any match. He grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth, and cracked his knuckles loudly. The crowd murmured, already placing mental bets. Surely a human, even from a death world, couldn't outmatch Kroth in a fight. As the match began, Kroth lunged forward, his heavy frame shaking the ground. He aimed a crushing blow at Jack's midsection, one powerful enough to incapacitate any ordinary recruit. But Jack wasn't ordinary. He sidestepped at the last possible moment, his movements fluid and precise. Kroth's punch hit nothing but air, and the force caused him to stumble slightly. Before anyone could process what had happened, Jack countered with a swift elbow strike to Kroth's side. It wasn't a wild swing, nor was it delivered with visible strain. Yet the impact sent the much larger alien reeling. Kroth clutched his side, eyes wide in shock. His confidence wavered, but he charged again, his pride at stake. This time, he came at Jack with a series of rapid strikes, his claws tearing through the air. Jack stayed calm. He dodged each attack with precision, never taking more than a single step back. His movements were not just fast. They were controlled. It was as if he could see the strikes coming before Kroth even threw them. In the rare instance when he couldn't evade entirely, Jack would block with his forearm, absorbing the force without flinching. Kroth's attacks began to slow, his breathing labored. It was clear that he was using all his strength, yet the human remained untouchable. In the observation deck, the instructors watched in stunned silence. Vok's claws tapped on the metal railing, his mind racing. He had expected Jack to hold his own, maybe even impress them with clever tactics. But this was beyond anything he'd seen from a first-day recruit. How was he doing that? One of the instructors muttered. He shouldn't be this fast, or this strong. Kroth, determined to end the fight with a decisive blow, let out a roar and launched himself at Jack with all his remaining energy. Jack shifted his weight, spinning out of Kroth's path. Then, with a calculated kick to the back of Kroth's knee, he brought the massive alien crashing down. Kroth hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out of him. Jack immediately moved in, locking Kroth's arm in a hold that forced the larger alien to yield. The match was over. Jack released him and stepped back. He wasn't gloating, nor did he raise his arms in victory. He simply stood there, his expression calm, as if the fight had been no more than a mild inconvenience. Kroth, on the other hand, lay on the ground, gasping for air, the realization of his defeat written all over his face. The crowd of recruits erupted into chatter. Some were awed. Others were frightened. A few whispered that they'd never seen anyone, alien or otherwise, move like that. He's not normal, one recruit said. He's more than just a Deathworlder. He's a predator. Others nodded, their earlier doubts turning into unease. Back in the observation deck, Vok turned to his fellow instructors. "This changes things," he said, his voice low. "If he's this strong, we need to reconsider the challenges. We can't treat him like a normal recruit." As the crowd dispersed and Croft limped away, Jack remained at the center of the arena. He tilted his head slightly, as if he could sense the unease in the air. For a moment, his sharp blue eyes met Vok's gaze through the observation deck's glass. And then, just as calmly as he had arrived, Jack turned and walked away, leaving the recruits and instructors questioning everything they thought they knew about Deathworlders. The fear spreads. The days following Jack's combat performance were filled with unease. Whispers about the Deathworlders' strength and skill spread through the Academy's halls like wildfire. Recruits who had once scoffed at the idea of a human training among them now avoided his gaze. Conversations stopped whenever Jack entered a room. Even the instructors, seasoned veterans of the Galactic Training Academy, exchanged concerned glances whenever his name was mentioned. Some recruits clung to the belief that Jack's victories were flukes. They told themselves that Croft's loss was due to overconfidence, or that the endurance run hadn't been a true test of strength. But those excuses grew thin when Jack continued to outperform everyone in every challenge. It wasn't just that he succeeded, it was how effortlessly he did so. Others began to see him not as an underdog, but as something far more intimidating, a predator who thrived in conditions that should have broken him. For many, the fear was instinctive. Aliens from peaceful worlds, where violence was rare, couldn't comprehend Jack's calm demeanor in the face of danger. They were used to warriors who roared, postured, or relied on their natural weapons to dominate. Jack needed none of that. His silence, his calculated movements, and his unshakable focus were more unsettling than any display of brute force. Rumors started circulating about Deathworlders. Some recruits claimed that humans were genetic anomalies, their bodies shaped by generations of survival on a hostile planet. Others whispered that Jack had undergone secret enhancements before coming to the Academy. One story, repeated in hushed tones, claimed that Deathworlders didn't just survive adversity. They thrived on it. The more impossible the challenge, the stronger they became. It wasn't long before a small group of recruits decided to confront Jack. They were the Academy's top fighters, the ones who had always dominated the rankings. Together, they thought, they could remind this human of his place. It wasn't about defeating him. It was about reasserting their own dominance. They waited for him in one of the Academy's training arenas late at night. Jack had a habit of practicing alone, often long after the official drills ended. He valued the solitude, and the darkness of the empty arena didn't bother him. Tonight was no different. He entered the arena quietly, his footsteps barely making the sound on the polished floor. He wore a simple training uniform, and his hands were wrapped in bandages from his earlier sessions. The group of aliens stepped out of the shadows, surrounding him. They weren't subtle about their intentions. Some of them cracked their knuckles, while others flexed their claws or adjusted the grips on their training staffs. They didn't speak at first, letting the weight of their presence do the talking. Jack stopped in the center of the arena and turned slowly to face them. He studied each of them, his blue eyes calm and steady. His posture was relaxed, as if he were about to begin another routine sparring session. This only made the group more uneasy. They had expected fear, or at least a defensive stance. Instead, Jack just stood there, unbothered. Finally, the leader of the group, a tall feline-like alien with sleek black fur, spoke. "You've caused quite a stir, Deathworlder. We're here to see if the rumors are true." Jack tilted his head slightly. "And what rumors are those?" "That you're some kind of monster," the feline hissed, baring her fangs. "That you're unbeatable." Jack's expression didn't change. "I'm not looking for a fight." "Too bad," another alien snarled, stepping forward. "Because you've got one." The group moved as one, clearly coordinated. They had trained together for months, and their strategy was simple: overwhelm him with numbers and force. If they could pressure him, make him lose his composure, they believed they could bring him down. But Jack didn't lose his composure. As the first alien lunged at him, Jack sidestepped with ease. His movements were efficient. No wasted energy, no unnecessary flash. He dodged a swing from a staff, ducked under a clawed swipe, and countered with a quick strike to the side of another attacker's head. One by one, his opponents found themselves on the ground, disarmed or incapacitated. The fight was over in less than a minute. Jack didn't gloat. He didn't deliver a triumphant speech. He simply straightened his posture and looked at the group. We're all here to train. If you want to improve, I'm happy to help. But this isn't the way. The defeated recruits didn't respond. They were too busy catching their breath and nursing their bruises. Jack turned and walked away, leaving them in the dimly lit arena. Word of the confrontation spread quickly. By morning, every recruit at the academy knew what had happened. Some were in awe of Jack's skill, while others grew even more wary of him. The instructors, now fully aware of the situation, held a private meeting. They knew they had to address the growing tension. Jack's presence had changed the dynamic of the entire academy, and they needed to find a way to manage it before things spiraled further out of control. But what none of them could deny was this: the human had proven himself to be more than just a survivor. He was a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy wasn't ready for what a Deathworlder could do. The ultimate test. The Academy's leadership gathered in the high observation chamber, their forms silhouetted against the glowing charts and monitors displaying Jack's previous performances. There was no denying it now. This human had surpassed all expectations. He hadn't just met their standards. He had shattered them. Yet, instead of fostering admiration, his success sowed discord among the instructors and recruits alike. Commander Reynolds has made quite an impression. One senior instructor rumbled, his leathery skin glinting in the dim light. His tone was not one of praise. The recruits are uneasy. They're not used to someone like him. Instructor Vok folded his massive arms and looked out over the training grounds, where recruits were preparing for another day of grueling tests. The council sent him here for a reason. We have to treat him like any other candidate. Any other candidate? Another instructor sneered, her segmented eyes narrowing. You saw what he did in the arena. He humiliated our top recruits. He completed every challenge with ease. If we keep treating him the same, we're going to have a mutiny on our hands. The other recruits are already starting to doubt whether they can compete. Vok's tail flicked with irritation, but he said nothing. The truth was, no one knew how to handle a Deathworlder. The human's mere presence challenged the Academy's fundamental assumptions about strength, skill, and the limits of their training protocols. The instructors weren't just worried about the recruits' morale. They were worried about their own authority. One of the senior advisors finally spoke, his voice heavy with both wariness and resolution. Then it's time to put him through the ultimate test. If he's as good as his performance suggests, he'll handle it. If not, well, it'll prove he's still just a recruit like the rest. The room fell silent as the plan took shape. The test they were about to assign had only been attempted a handful of times in the Academy's history. Most who tried never finished. A few didn't come back at all. It was a trial designed not just to measure endurance or combat skill, but to test the very core of a recruit's willpower. It was also meant to expose weaknesses, physical, mental, emotional, and ultimately, to see if a candidate could adapt and survive under the most extreme conditions. When Vok finally nodded in agreement, the others knew it was settled. The human would be sent into the wild. Alone. That afternoon, Jack was called to the briefing chamber. He stood at ease, his sharp blue eyes scanning the panel of instructors before him. Despite the tension in the room, his demeanor remained calm and composed. Vok spoke first, his deep voice reverberating in the confined space. Commander Reynolds, you have been selected for a special trial. It will not be like the tests you've faced so far. There will be no instructors watching over you, no safety protocols to fall back on. You will be dropped into the Veverous Expanse, an uncharted jungle region known for its hostile environment and lethal fauna. Jack didn't flinch. He simply waited, listening. You'll have 72 hours to navigate the terrain and retrieve a locator beacon from a designated point. You'll have no weapons, no supplies beyond a basic survival kit, and no communications equipment. The only way back is to reach the beacon. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Jack said without hesitation. Vok searched Jack's face for any hint of doubt or fear. He found none. The human's confidence wasn't cocky or aggressive. It was steady, grounded, and completely unshakable. That, more than anything else, made Vok uneasy. Dismissed, he finally said, waving Jack out. The other instructors watched him go, their expressions a mix of apprehension and grim curiosity. No one spoke until Jack was gone. "He'll never make it," one muttered, his mandibles clicking nervously. Even Deathworlders have their limits. But Vok wasn't so sure. Part of him hoped the human would fail. Part of him feared what would happen if he didn't. The shuttle ride to the Veverous expanse was silent. Jack sat alone, staring out the window at the swirling colors of hyperspace. The survival kit at his feet contained only the bare essentials: a knife, a length of cord, a flint for making fire, and a few water purification tablets. It wasn't much, but it was all he needed. When the shuttle emerged from hyperspace and began its descent into the atmosphere, the pilot turned to Jack. "Are you sure you're ready for this? No one's ever come back from the expanse in one piece." Jack didn't answer right away. He just stared out at the dense jungle below, its surface alive with motion, creatures slithering, flying, and prowling through the shadowy canopy. Finally, he said, "I'm not like the others." The pilot shook his head. "Your funeral, Deathworlder." Moments later, the shuttle's hatch opened, and Jack leaped into the unknown. The jungle was alive in ways Jack had never experienced before. Every sound, every rustle of leaves, every distant roar, was a reminder that he wasn't the top predator here. He landed in a small clearing and immediately set to work. The first priority was water. Without it, the humid, oppressive heat would drain him in hours. He moved through the dense foliage with quiet efficiency, his movements controlled and deliberate. He found a small stream within an hour, filtered the water with the tablets, and drank deeply. As he crouched by the stream, he sensed movement behind him. He didn't turn. Instead, he listened, his instincts taking over. The creature watching him wasn't large, but it was fast. He caught its reflection in the water: 4 legs, a sleek, scaled body, and rows of glinting teeth. It was stalking him, waiting for him to show weakness. Jack didn't show any. When the creature pounced, he rolled to the side, drawing his knife in a single smooth motion. The fight was over in seconds. Jack wasn't just stronger than his opponents, he was smarter. He'd already guessed its movements, studied its patterns. When he stood over its still body, he felt no triumph. This wasn't a competition, it was survival. The hours passed, then days. Jack encountered more threats: predators, venomous plants, sudden storms that turned the jungle floor into a quagmire. Each time, he adapted. He built traps from the cord in his kit, crafted makeshift tools, and relied on his endurance to outlast the dangers. He slept lightly, his senses always alert. The jungle tested him constantly, but he never faltered. When he finally reached the beacon site on the 3rd day, he was battered but unbroken. He activated the beacon and sat down on a fallen log, waiting for the retrieval team. Around him, the jungle pulsed with life, but none of it dared come near. When the shuttle arrived, the pilot stared at Jack in disbelief. "You're alive." Jack gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Told you I wasn't like the others." One of his teammates, a short amphibious alien named Rel, finally approached him. "Listen, human, we know you're strong, but this isn't about strength. It's about working together. Don't go off on your own. Follow the plan." Jack nodded once. Understood. As the trial began, the team moved cautiously through the simulated terrain. The Predator's cloaking device made it nearly invisible, and its programmed attacks were relentless. Within minutes it struck, emerging from a shadowed ridge and targeting the team's leader. Jack reacted instantly. With a burst of speed, he closed the distance and blocked the Predator's initial attack, giving his teammates enough time to regroup. But it quickly became apparent that the Predator's design was even more advanced than the recruits had expected. Its movements were unpredictable, and it adapted to their tactics. The team struggled to keep up, their initial plan unraveling as the Predator systematically targeted each member. Jack, however, kept his focus. He watched its movements carefully, noting the slight shimmer in the air that betrayed its cloaking field. While the others scattered in panic, Jack stayed calm, positioning himself to intercept its attacks. When the Predator lunged for Rel, Jack acted decisively. He tackled the robotic creature mid-strike, slamming it into the ground. The impact deactivated its cloaking field momentarily, revealing its sleek, metallic form. Jack called out to the others, "Now, pin it down and disable the core." The team hesitated at first, but Jack's commanding tone left no room for argument. They moved in, using their training tools to hold the Predator in place, while Jack exposed its power core. With one precise strike, he deactivated the machine, ending the trial. The team stood in silence, catching their breath as the instructors called the trial to a close. They had succeeded, but it was clear to everyone that their success hinged on Jack's actions. While the trial was intended to test teamwork, it had instead highlighted just how much they relied on the Deathworlders' instincts and leadership. Back in the observation deck, Vok shook his head. "He's a force of nature," he muttered. "Every test we give him, he turns into something else. Something more." The other instructors agreed, but their unease only grew. Jack's performance wasn't just exceptional, it was redefining the Academy's expectations. The more he succeeded, the more he distanced himself from the rest. And the farther he rose, the more the Academy began to question if they could ever truly understand, let alone control, a Deathworlder. The final challenge. The assembly hall was filled with an unusual stillness as recruits from every division gathered. The Academy's leadership stood on the raised dais at the front, their expressions grave, their eyes scanning the restless crowd. A sense of anticipation hung in the air. No one knew exactly what to expect, only that this was no ordinary announcement. Jack Reynolds stood among the recruits, his calm presence a sharp contrast to the nervous whispers around him. Instructor Vok stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the rest of the leadership. His voice, deep and resonant, cut through the murmur. "Cadets, you've all faced rigorous trials. Some of you have excelled, some have stumbled, but every one of you has grown stronger. Now, we will push you further." The hall grew quieter. Recruits leaned in, their curiosity outweighing their fear. "The final challenge," Vok continued, "is a coordinated operation unlike anything you faced. Teams will be randomly assigned. Each team will have one objective: infiltrate a high-security facility and retrieve a critical asset. The facility's defenses are extensive: traps, drones, automated turrets, and a patrolling squad of simulated hostiles. You must rely on strategy, adaptability, and above all, trust in each other." Jack glanced around, noting the tension in the faces of the other recruits. This challenge wasn't just about physical prowess. It was a test of leadership, intelligence, and the ability to function under pressure. "And one more thing," Vok added, his gaze locking onto Jack for a brief moment before sweeping over the rest. "The assets you retrieve will determine your team's survival. Failure to secure them will result in immediate termination of the exercise. This is not just a test, it is a final evaluation of your place in this academy." With that, the leadership exited the dais, leaving the recruits to process what they'd just heard. The room exploded into chatter, theories and questions flying back and forth. Some were confident, others were clearly panicked. Jack stood silent, absorbing the details, already beginning to strategize in his mind. When the teams were announced, Jack found himself assigned to a diverse group of recruits he'd barely interacted with before. Rel, the amphibious alien from the Predator trials, was among them, along with an avian tactician named Lirith, a bulky mechanoid named Vrex, and a small, nervous insectoid named Sela. None of them had worked together before, and their first meeting as a team was tense. "So," Rel said, trying to break the ice, "anyone have a plan?" Lirith fluffed her feathers, her sharp beak clicking as she spoke. "The key will be disabling the facility's surveillance systems early. If we can stay off their radar, we'll have a better chance of reaching the objective without direct confrontation." Vrex's metallic voice rumbled. "I can handle the automated turrets. My shielding is strong enough to absorb a few hits." "Great," Sela chirped, her antennae twitching nervously. "What about the drones?" "They're fast. They'll spot us before we even get close." Rel shrugged. "We'll have to move even faster." Jack, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Speed is good, but we'll need precision." "Lirith's right. Taking out the surveillance is our first priority. Once we're in the facility, Vrex and I can handle the defenses. Rel and Sela will focus on navigation and keeping us on track. Lirith, you'll be our lookout. If something moves, I want to know before it sees us." The others stared at him for a moment, then nodded. It wasn't the most detailed plan, but it was clear and logical. Jack's tone left no room for doubt. The recruits didn't know much about him beyond the rumors, but in that moment, they were willing to follow. The challenge began under the cover of simulated night. The facility loomed in the distance, a fortress of reinforced alloy walls, glowing red sensor lights, and the faint hum of active defenses. The team moved swiftly and silently, Jack taking point. Lirith's keen eyesight proved invaluable as she spotted a hidden tripwire that would have alerted the facility's drones. She signaled to Jack, who carefully disabled it before motioning the others forward. As they approached the main gate, Vrex stepped forward, his bulky form absorbing a hail of turret fire as he used his heavy plating to shield the others. Jack and Rel slipped behind him, planting EMP charges that disabled the turrets in seconds. The gate fell silent, and the team pressed on. Inside, the facility was a maze of corridors and locked doors. Sela's nimble hands worked quickly, hacking into control panels to bypass security measures. But the deeper they went, the more complex the defenses became. Drones zipped through the air, their sensors scanning for intruders. Jack took down one with a precise throw of a stun baton, while Rel used his natural agility to lure another into an ambush. The team began to trust each other's abilities, their movements becoming more fluid and coordinated. When they finally reached the objective room, they encountered their greatest challenge yet. A large, heavily armored sentinel blocked the way. It was a final obstacle, designed to test every skill the recruits had learned. The team hesitated for only a moment before Jack stepped forward. Vrex drawn its attention. "Lirith, find a vantage point. Sela, stay out of sight. Rel, look for weak points in the armor." Jack's orders were clear and confident. The team sprang into action. Vrex charged the sentinel, absorbing its heavy blows while Jack flanked it. Rel climbed onto a nearby console, using his vantage point to spot a weak joint in the sentinel's plating. "There, left shoulder," he called out. Jack didn't hesitate. He leaped onto the sentinel's arm, using his strength and speed to exploit the weak spot. The sentinel faltered, and Lirith, from her perch, dropped a precision EMP grenade onto its back. With a flash of light, the sentinel powered down, its massive frame crashing to the ground. The room fell silent except for the team's heavy breathing. They had done it. Sela quickly retrieved the asset, a glowing data core, and handed it to Jack. The challenge was over. When the team returned to the academy, they were greeted with applause. Their success had been broadcast to the other recruits, who watched in awe as the once unknown group proved themselves in the final challenge. Even the instructors, who rarely showed emotion, seemed impressed. But Jack didn't linger in the spotlight. He handed the data core to Vok, nodded to his teammates, and walked away. As he disappeared into the crowd, one thing became clear. The human had not only survived the Academy's trials, he had become their standard. And in doing so, he left a mark that would change the Academy forever. The Deathworlders' legacy. The day after the final challenge, the Academy's atmosphere shifted. Recruits whispered in the halls, instructors spoke in hushed tones, and the usual confidence that buzzed through the training grounds was replaced by a quiet awe. It wasn't just the outcome of the mission that lingered in everyone's minds. It was how Jack had led his team, how they had all succeeded because of him. For the first time in the Academy's history, a Deathworlder had not only passed the most grueling tests, but had redefined what those tests even meant. Jack, as always, paid little attention to the growing rumors. He spent his hours in the sparring rings or running solo drills in the outdoor endurance fields. It wasn't about proving himself anymore. For him, it never had been. It was about staying sharp, improving, and always preparing for whatever might come next. But others weren't so calm. Many of the recruits had started to see Jack not as one of them, but as something entirely separate. Some revered him, looking to him as an ideal, a figure of what they could aspire to if only they worked hard enough. Others resented him, seeing in his success a threat to the very balance of the Academy. "I heard he took down the Sentinel on his own," one recruit said, voice trembling slightly. "No, the whole team worked together," another corrected. "But he was the one who made it happen. Without him, they would have failed." "Maybe they should send more Deathworlders here," a younger cadet whispered, glancing around as if the mere suggestion might summon trouble. "They can't," came the hushed response. "Imagine what that would do. One of him is already too much for this place." The Academy's leadership was having similar conversations. In the high observation chamber, where the final mission footage had been reviewed multiple times, the instructors and senior advisors sat in a tense circle. Instructor Vok stood at the center, his tail flicking rhythmically, a sign of his own inner conflict. "You've all seen the results," Vok began. Commander Reynolds led his team to a flawless completion of the final challenge. Their success was due in no small part to his ability to adapt, to analyze, and to lead. One of the senior advisors, a crystalline being whose facets glimmered under the dim light, folded their shimmering hands. "But it's more than that. He's shown us what a Deathworlder can do. He's changed the standards. And that's exactly the problem." Another instructor interjected, a heavy-set, quadrupedal alien whose armored hide seemed to bristle as he spoke. "What happens if we start bringing in more Deathworlders? The other recruits already struggle to keep up. The Academy will lose its purpose, or it will evolve," Vok countered. "Perhaps this is the future. We can no longer ignore the humans. Deathworlders are unlike anything we've trained before. If the galaxy faces new threats, we must adapt. That includes our training methods." "But at what cost?" another voice challenged. "Do we risk alienating every other species here, turning the Academy into a place that only Deathworlders can thrive?" The room fell silent. No one had an answer. It was a conversation no one wanted to have, but Jack's presence demanded it. Whether they liked it or not, he had changed the game. The Academy couldn't go back to what it was before. Not after Jack Reynolds. Meanwhile, Jack continued to train as if nothing had changed. When Vok approached him on the sparring grounds that afternoon, Jack simply nodded in acknowledgement and waited for the instructor to speak. "You know they're all talking about you," Vok said after a moment, his deep voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Jack paused in his movements, lowering the training weights he'd been lifting. "They've been talking about me since the day I arrived." "This is different," Vok pressed. "You've set a standard that no one here can match. The recruits look at you and wonder if they'll ever measure up. The instructors wonder if we're even capable of teaching someone like you." Jack met Vok's gaze evenly. "What are you asking me, instructor?" Vok exhaled heavily. "Do you think this academy should start training more humans?" The question caught Jack off guard. He considered it for a moment before answering. If the galaxy is as dangerous as you say it is, then you'll need everyone you can get, humans included. And if they can't keep up? Vok asked. If the others, aliens who have trained here for generations, fall behind because of your kind. Jack's voice remained steady, though there was a hint of steel behind it. Then maybe you need to reconsider what keeping up means. Strength doesn't just come from one's body. It comes from adaptability, strategy, the will to push through when everything is against you. I'm not asking you to lower your standards. I'm asking you to raise them. Vok stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he gave a slow nod. You're not what I expected, Commander Reynolds, but perhaps you're what this academy needed. As the weeks went on, the academy began to change. New training regimens were introduced, inspired by Jack's methods and performance. The instructors became stricter, more demanding, but also more inventive in their approach. The recruits, though some still grumbled and doubted themselves, gradually began to rise to the challenge. Those who stayed learned that it wasn't about being like Jack. It was about finding their own strength and using it to succeed. Jack, for his part, never sought glory. When he finally graduated, he did so quietly, without ceremony. But his name was etched into the Academy's records, not as a recruit, but as a catalyst. The Deathworlder who had shown them all what was possible. Long after he left, the Academy continued to adapt, taking in new recruits, some from Deathworlds, some not, who had heard of the human who had changed everything. And though the whispers of fear and doubt never entirely disappeared, they were joined by something else: respect. In the end, Jack Reynolds didn't just pass the Academy's trials. He became its legacy.